My first question is, before coming to Pakistan, you visited Afghanistan and you had meeting with President Ashraf Ghani and Dr. Abdullah and Hamid Karzai. So what sense you have found there in Afghanistan?
First of all, thank you very much for having me, and indeed I'm very happy to be back in Islamabad and back in Pakistan. Yes, I visited Kabul about 2 weeks ago. I had very good meetings at senior level, as you mentioned, and also with civil society, think tanks, journalists, and etc. It was a short and intense visit, and I must say I felt there is a strong sense of pessimism in the short term. Almost every person I met thought that the violence. Every person I met thought that the level of violence would increase. It's already, as we know, at a very high level with civilian casualties at a high level, targeted assassinations, targeted killing of journalists, civil society activists, female judges, etc., and government officials. But there is an expectation and a fear that with the completion of the withdrawal of US and NATO troops, that the level of violence will increase. Paradoxically, in a way, for many years, a lot of Afghans and others have asked for these troops to leave, but now, when they leave and the way they leave is causing concern and worries about the immediate future.
What's the European Union opinion about the pattern of leaving of the American and NATO forces?
We can discuss history, and I think historians will judge on that one day. My focus is on the present and on the future. A decision has been taken, and we are now adapting to, as best as we can, the consequences of that decision. It was never a secret, and it was not a surprise that the troops would withdraw. And as I mentioned, many have been calling for that. So that's now the reality we are facing. But what we are saying is that while the troops withdraw, our intention is to stay. The EU has commitments vis-à-vis the Afghan people. Our policy hasn't changed, our objectives haven't changed, and we will do whatever we can to stay engaged with Afghanistan and present in Afghanistan.
So European Union will stay in Afghanistan, but the question is in which shape?
As you know, the European Union has never had boots on the ground, but we have a strong development impact, and we have our diplomatic presence in Kabul, and that's what we want to maintain.
Excellency, there is an opinion that Dr. Ashraf Ghani and his government, that is a guarantee for the stability in the current situation. But the Taliban and some of the people inside Afghanistan, they consider Dr. Ashraf Ghani and his government and his setup as an impediment in the way of peace or reconciliation with Taliban. What's the European Union or your opinion about Ashraf Ghani government? He should stay or he should step down for the reconciliation with Taliban?
I would have expected me to be an advocate of an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned process, and I am. So that choice is a choice for the Afghan people to make, and there is a process for that. And that process is the peace negotiations in Doha, where the two sides, the side of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan and the Taliban, are now negotiating, and I think should be negotiating in earnest about the future governance structure of Afghanistan. What it would look like, how it will be different. I guess it may be different from the current setup, and who will then finally be elected, nominated, will depend on the outcome of that those negotiations.
Excellency, you also visited Qatar and had meeting with the Taliban delegation and the other people. So there is a general perception that the Taliban are wasting time and they are not ready for any reconciliation with the Afghan government. So how did you find Taliban behavior? Do you find any will in their ranks?
It was a private conversation, and it was my first meeting, so I do not wish to comment too much on what we discussed in that meeting. But my general impression is the following. The Taliban feel that they are being victorious, that they have won, they have defeated one superpower, and now they have probably defeated two superpowers. And they are likely to continue and hope that they will make further progress in military terms and count that this will translate into a stronger negotiation position later on, maybe in the fall. There are risks with this, however. One is, of course, that they are not as strong militarily as they think they are. The situation is quite different from what it was in the 1990s. We have a much more well-trained and well-equipped national security force, the ANDSF. There is also risk of waiting. There's also a risk that if you wait and if the violence escalates, other actors will get involved. We have seen in the past militias, arming of militias, hedging of bets, and that the situation both on the ground and if and when they return to negotiations may become much more complex. So from that perspective, I would see a certain logic in trying to gain and to translate what they have now into a strong negotiation position. And that's exactly what is missing now. We don't know what the Taliban want. They haven't put anything on the table.
Excellency, as you refer to 1990, so or the decade of 90, so I will put the earlier question on another way, that from President Bush to President Obama and to President Donald Trump, they were assuring in the past that we will not repeat the same mistake which we committed or the Western world committed in the 90s. But now they are leaving abruptly. And the Afghan feels, and the Afghan government and the Afghan civil society, they feels that once again we were betrayed by the US. So it is not contrary to their past claims and assurances which they made with the world and with the Afghan community.
As I said, I think what matters now is indeed the perceptions of the Afghans matter, and that will have an impact, of course, how they perceive the situation. But we are now at a moment when we have to face what we have, and Afghans have to face what they see happening. I have heard similar comments, obviously, by Afghans. But right now, as I said, it's a bit paradoxical, because for a long time there have been calls for the troops to leave, and there have been calls for an Afghan-owned, Afghan-led. There is a lot of uncertainty in the situation, I fully recognize that, but it is also an opportunity. It is an opportunity for the Afghans to finally agree to find a solution, and a solution that works for them without interference from other powers.
Excellency, some of the forces, particularly the Afghan government and President Ashraf Ghani, they still consider Pakistan as part of the problem. But Pakistan claims that it's part of the solution. What's your opinion about the role of Pakistan? Is Pakistan a part of the problem or a part of the solution?
We don't choose our neighbors. Pakistan and Afghanistan share a long history. They share a long border. And there is a very high level, unfortunately, of mistrust between, I wouldn't say between the two peoples, but between the leadership. What happens in Afghanistan will have an impact on what happens in Pakistan. An insecure, violent, unsettled Afghanistan will have spillover effects on Pakistan. And I hear very encouraging signals, not just recently, but also recently. We have seen attempts, we have seen a visit by Prime Minister Khan to Kabul. We have seen contacts at the highest level with the Chief of Army Staff, General Bajwa, together with others visiting Kabul. Then there are to talk and to try to find agreements. That's very encouraging. Then we see sometime a follow-up and spillover and unfortunate comments being made. We can focus on those comments, and that would block the process. We can also focus on, in a strategic and statesmanlike manner, on what has to be done and what the situation calls for. And if we do that, and if Pakistan and Afghanistan do that, then there is hope. And then certainly Pakistan is part of the solution, not part of the problem. I also happen to think that Afghanistan is part of the solution for Pakistan. We talk about connectivity, we talk about trade, we talk about energy from Central Asia. You remember the old slogan, with due respect, you're old enough to remember the connecting people. And I think we could actually say Afghanistan connecting people, because that's the way it should be, and that's the way it should be because it is where it is. But it just so happens that as long as the civil war continues, this will not happen. But the day when it ends, it will. And then you will see all these, or some of these, connectivity networks, digital connectivity, transit trade, the link between South Asia and Central Asia and Afghanistan will really play the role it can. It will help the Pakistani economy, it will help the Afghan economy, it will help the Central Asian economy, and the perception of Afghanistan will be very, very different from what it is today.
But Excellency, here in Pakistan and in this region, the main source of connectivity is considered to be the CPEC, and particularly the role of China. And Afghanistan can become a route with Central Asia for trade. But obviously all these things is happening in this region with the support of China and in the context of CPEC. But on the other side, we saw that the NATO, under the leadership of the United States, they are going to oppose or initiating its own initiative against the Belt and Road Initiative of Russia. So there is a conspiracy theory which prevails here in this region, that maybe the American and the European friends, they don't want stability in Afghanistan, and willingly they are trying to bring back Taliban to Afghanistan. How do you respond to that conspiracy theory?
With due respect, I could never beat a Pakistani when it comes to conspiracy theories after 3 years in Islamabad, so I will not even try to go there.
Okay. If the Taliban forcefully occupy Kabul, and if, God forbid, Afghanistan go back to the civil war, so what will be the reaction and the response of the European Union?
Our focus now is on the peace negotiations. Our focus is on helping in whatever way we can, and that I understand is also the focus of Pakistan and many neighboring countries and countries in the region, to bring the parties back to negotiations. We hear the Taliban saying that they're not going to take Kabul by force. They say that there is no military solution and that they wish to have a negotiated solution. So in terms of what we say, what they say, what Pakistan says, there is a convergence, and that convergence has to then be translated from words into action.
My last question directly not relates to you and to your area, but I think that issue is also affecting the relationship of the European Union and Pakistan, and also will affect your relationship with Taliban in Afghanistan. And that's the issue of Islamophobia. On the issue of Islamophobia, how the Pakistani government and the Pakistani parliament responded. So what's the feeling of European Union towards Pakistan, and how European Union is looking into the concerns of the Pakistani government about the Islamophobia, and particularly some of the statements of the French leadership?
I have been into my job for 5 weeks, and I have limited time and limited intellectual capacity to deal with more than Afghanistan. So I must say this is not an issue I have actively followed, and I would advise you to, if you have the time, to discuss it with my colleagues in Islamabad.